I never imagined I would sit down and share my story like this. Heart open, voice shaking. Truth pouring out like water from a crack I tried to seal for too long. I used to believe that love was enough to keep a marriage strong. That trust, once built, could never be broken. That promises mattered, that he meant what he said, that we were unbreakable. But all of that shattered the day I uncovered the truth. Looking back now, I see how blind I was. The signs were always there, whispering warnings I chose to silence. We had been married for 12 years. 12 long years of shared dreams, quiet sacrifices, and what I thought was mutual respect. I was a full-time mom and a freelance writer. My life revolved around two people: our daughter Sophie, who had just turned 8, and my husband Daniel, the man I believed was the rock of our little family. Daniel worked as a senior marketing consultant for a big firm in the city. He was ambitious, always busy, always striving. I admired that about him, until I realized that ambition came with late nights, business trips, missed calls, a growing silence that no longer felt like comfort. It felt like distance. I should have known something was wrong on our anniversary last year. He forgot, not even a text. He called later that night, rushed and distracted, said he had meetings, promised to make it up to me. I smiled. I told myself it was fine. But deep down, something inside me shifted. Then the subtle changes began. He started locking his phone, spending extra hours at the gym, buying new cologne, dressing better even on work-from-home days, carrying 2 phones. One was for work, so he claimed. I wanted to believe him, because if I didn't, then my whole world would collapse. One evening, Sophie was playing by my feet as I worked on an article in the living room. Daniel was upstairs on a video call. His laptop sat on the dining table screen, still open. Then it happened. A notification, a soft chime. One message from someone named Rena Hart. Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you. My heart stopped. I walked over. I wasn't going to snoop. I told myself I'd just close the screen. But I did look, and I wish I hadn't. What I saw shattered me. Dozens of messages, photos, late-night calls, voice notes. She called him baby, told him she missed his touch. He told her he was trapped in a loveless marriage, that he was staying for Sophie, that he wished he had met her sooner. I couldn't breathe. I shut the laptop, walked away, locked myself in the bathroom, and stared into the mirror. Tears streamed down silently. But I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. Because Sophie was right there, and she couldn't see me break. Not yet. I didn't confront him that night. I needed time. I needed a plan. Because if he could lie that easily, I could learn how to pretend to. But my revenge wouldn't be loud or messy. No screaming. No thrown plates. I wanted something deeper, something he'd feel. I began gathering evidence, screenshots, call logs, recordings from our home cameras that showed him sneaking around in the backyard. And all the while, I smiled, cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his jokes, became the perfect wife. He thought I hadn't changed. But every move I made was intentional. Behind the scenes, I quietly opened a new bank account, moved funds, consulted a lawyer, prepared separation papers but didn't sign them. And then I reached out to Rena. From a fake profile, I messaged her, pretended to be a potential client looking for spa services. She worked at a boutique spa. She was 28, beautiful, naive. She responded politely. We arranged a meeting. She thought it was for business. When she arrived, she looked confused. I invited her in. She sat across from me, nervous, curious, still unaware. Then I told her everything. I showed her wedding photos, pictures of Sophie, screenshots of their messages. At first, she didn't believe me. She thought I was jealous, or bitter, or lying. But the more I showed her, the more her face fell. She hadn't known. He told her he was divorced. She looked devastated. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't the villain. He was. We weren't enemies. We were both victims of the same man's lies. And that's when we made a plan. Together, not for chaos, not for destruction, but for truth. She agreed to help me confront him not because I asked her to, but because she was done being fooled. Daniel's birthday was the perfect opportunity. He had told me he was going on a guy's trip. His assistant confirmed there was no such plan, so I encouraged him, helped him pack, even slipped a gift into his bag. What he didn't know was that I had booked dinner reservations. 4-3. Me, him, and Reena. And what unfolded at that table. But for herself, so we waited for the weekend. Daniel left texting me that he was off for the guy's trip. I replied, "Have fun, babe, you deserve it." Meanwhile, I had Drina meet him at the hotel. She confronted him there calmly, firmly, shuttled him, everything she knew, and I was watching the whole thing from a hidden camera. She wore on her pendant when he agreed to deny it. She played the audio recordings. When he tried to explain, she showed him the photos. He went pale. She left him there in that room, stunned and humiliated. But that wasn't the real revenge that came after. When he returned home, I greeted him with a smile. I acted like nothing had happened then. Fate vening after putting Sophie to bed, is it? Across from him and laid everything out, the evidence, the photos, their recordings, the confrontation video. I watched as his face fell as all the lease came crashing down around him. He begged, apologized, claimed he was lost, said it was a mistake, that he never stopped loving me. I listened silently when he finished. I handed him the divorce papers. His signature was all that was missing. Stared at them speechless. I told him I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I told him that I would never let Sophie think her father was a monster boot. I was done being his doormat. I was done being the woman he lied to and is respected. I gave him two options: synth capers quietly and walk away with some dignity, or fight it in court, on risk everything going public, including what I had on video. He signed. This is just the beginning. The real revenge that's still unfolding, and it's not about hurting him. It's a booter building me, and when I'm done he'll wish he had never taken me for granted. After Daniel signed the papers, there was a strange silence between us, not just in the house, but in the air. It wasn't the heavy, angry kind. It was quiet, like an empty room after everyone has left Jeopardy, like something important had ended. Everyone knew it, but no one wanted to say it aloud. Moved out 2 weeks later. He packed some clothes, his laptop, and a few framed pictures of Sophie. I watched from the window as he drove away, and instead of feeling grief, I felt something that had been missing for a long time: peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the beginning of something stable, something. On a set night, I slept better than I had in months, but I wasn't done. Daniel thought signing those papers was the end. He believed the worst was over. What hadn't known was that his betrayal had set something off inside me. I had spent so many years being careful, being forgiving, being patient. I had been the wife who overlooked flaws, who sacrificed, who adapted. Now I was done adapting. I was going to rebuild, but on my terms. Andy was going to make sure that the fallout from his betrayal followed him like a shadow. The first thing I did was rebrand myself. I updated my online portfolio, added new writing samples, and pitched to platforms I had previously been too shy to contact. I began writing personal essays, disguised, of course. Names changed, but the themes were real stories about betrayal, emotional abuse, gaslighting, and self-renewal. Of them went viral suddenly. I had thousands of women reaching out to me, thanking me for sharing what they hadn't been able to say themselves. A few editors reached out to offers invitations to speak. I had gone from a ghostwriter behind screens to a voice people actually listened to. Daniel, meanwhile, was trying to maintain appearances. He moved in with a friend temporarily, then tried to patch things up with Rena, who, as far as I know, and nothing more to do with him. I didn't care about her anymore. She had served her purpose. We hadn't spoken since the hotel incident. That chapter had closed, but Daniel couldn't hide from the consequences. His firm had at least promoted itself as familiar-oriented loot, built on trust. So when a mutual acquaintance casually forwarded a fictional story from a trending blog that bore striking similarities to ascertain marketing consultants' recent scandal, Well, things began to crumble. He called me one afternoon, voice trembling, asking if I had written a butt theme. I didn't lie, I told him. I had written the truth, that it was my story, and I had the right to tell it. And unless he wanted to publicly admit it was about him, there wasn't much he could have. Hung up, I knew he was struggling at work. His spotless image had taken a heightened. The gossip in corporate circles is quiet, but deadly clients asked. Questions his boss asked even more, and in an industry built on reputation, thaws cracks in his personal life were now costing him professionally. I didn't need to destroy him. Whose own actions were doing that just fine, but I didn't want revenge to be my entire life. I wanted something for myself, so I took some off savings I had moved before the divorce and enrolled in a certificateprogram for digital media and publishing, hired a babysitter, and started dating workshops. I'd changed my wardrobe. Not to look better for any O'Neills, but to feel stronger. I cut my hair, changed the way I carried myself. I was becoming someone I had long forgotten. Sophie noticed. She started calling me Supermom. I laughed when she said it. Butenside, I felt like I was earning that until she was my anchor, and I made sure I thought none of the chaos between her father and me touched her. I never spoke badly about him in front of her. I kept her routines the same. I answered her questions with care and never lied. One day she asked, "Do you still love Daddy?" I paused, then I said, "I love the part o' theme that gave me you." That seemed now for her. As the weeks passed, Daniel's attempts to talk became more desperate. He started sending long emails apologizing again, saying he had made a huge mistake, asking if there was a chance to fix things. I never replied. I didn't delete them either. I kept them as reminders, not of the man he was, but far I had come. But the most unexpected part of it all came when I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference in the city. I was nervous. I had never stood in front of a crowd like that. I prepared my speech carefully, focusing not on what had happened to me, but what I had done afterward, how betrayal had shattered me, yes, but also how it had pushed me to rebuild. When I walked on top that stage, something changed. I was on top stage essays. Wife anymore. I wasn't the woman who had been cheated on. I was someone new. Someone stronger. After the event, people lined up to talk to me. Some hugged me, some cried, and for the first time, I realized that my revenge wasn't about Daniel anymore. It was about turning pain into purpose. Beauty. Of course, Daniel didn't disappear from his story. One evening, about 5 months after the divorce, I found a letter slipped under me door, not emailed, not texted, an actual handwritten letter. It was from him, and I told me he had lost his job, that some investors had pulled out, that he was drowning. He asked me if I could help him get a few of his contacts back. I sat with that letter for a long time. This was the man who once looked me in the eyes and told another woman I was holding him back, who told her he was trapped with me now. He was the one trapped by his own lies, his own ego, and wanted me, the woman he discarded, to help him dig himself out. So I did think a cruel thing I could think of. I replied with a thank you note, just a few Linessi. Hope you find your way. We all macahoses. These were yoursi. Never heard from him again after Thappy, the end of that year. I had published me first book, a collection of essays about survival, reinvention, and identity. It sold better than I expected. He dedicated it to Sophie, and in the acknowledgments I wrote, "To the person who broke me, thank you. You introduced me to the woman I was meant to Beth. It was the revenge, not fire, not destruction, but rebirth. I had taken what was meant to break me and turned it into a platform. I had gone from betrayed wife to best-selling author, from silence to strength. But there's still more to this story, 'cause pain doesn't just disappear. It transforms, and sometimes you least expect. It circles back. What happened next showed me just how far a man can fall and how far a woman can rise when she refuses to let the past define Herman's past life. Became steady against if he was thriving in school. I was invited to write for 2 major platforms and had even been offered a small column of my own. My days were full, my nights peaceful, and the ghost of my past no longer lived in every corner of my home. But Then one day, while walking out of a bookstore after a book signing event, I saw him, Daniel. He looked tired. His clothes hung awkwardly on him like they belonged to a man with more confidence than. He currently had his eyes once harp, and focus seemed lost. He hesitated. When he saw me, and for a moment, I thought he might pretend. Not talk no me, but then he approached slowly, like a man approaching a mirror. He's afraid to face high. Said, I nodded politely high. There was a silence that followed one I didn't feel the need to fill. I read your book. He said I knew it was about me. I looked him straight in the eyes. Wasn't not really. It was about Muhat. I survived. He seemed to swallow that truth with difficulty. Then he said something I never expected. I lost a very thing. I didn't flinch. Number you gave it away. He tried to laugh, but it did din his throat. You really became a momethano. I replied. I remembered who I was before. You tried to make me smaller. He nodded slowly, eyes wet but not crying. I deserved all of it. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say, and then the most unexpected moment of grace ever experienced. I said, I hope you'll find peace. Daniel, not for me, for yourself. He looked at me like I had just handed him a piece of his soul back. I didn't what? For a reply, I walked away, and it never looked back. That was the final piece of my revenge, not vengeance, but freedom, not hatred, but indifference. I had rebuilt my life from the ruins hello fit behind, and in doing so, I had turned the ashes into gold. Now, every time Simone reads my story, every time a woman tells me she found her strength through my words, I feel it again, not weapon, but the power, the kind of power no one can ever take from me again. Thanks for listening.